Why do we need self-esteem? Why is self-esteem important by Nathaniel Branden, PhD? To comprehend self-esteem, we must ask ourselves, why does one need it? For lower animals, there is no concern about the effectiveness of their cognition or the value of their beings. But people ponder the question, can I trust my mind? Am I capable of thinking? Am I good enough? Do I suffice? Am I morally upright? Do I have integrity? Or, more specifically, are my principles and actions in harmony? Am I deserving of honor, affection, prosperity, and happiness? The reason such queries should even arise is not obvious. Two fundamental realities that are inherent to our species as a whole lead to our need for self-esteem. The first is that our ability to effectively employ our consciousness is essential to both our survival and our ability to successfully control our surroundings. Our capacity for thought determines our quality of life and survival. The second is that proper consciousness usage is not automatic or wired in at birth. One of the most important factors in controlling its behavior is choice, and with it, personal accountability. The fundamental element of survival is the mind. We rely on the direction of our special form of consciousness, the form that is exclusively human, our conceptual capacity, the faculty of abstraction, generalization, and integration for our survival and well-being, like every other creature capable of awareness. What I mean by the term mind is a particular type of consciousness. Our capacity to reason, which means to understand relationships, is its essence. Our ability to train our thoughts properly is essential to both our health and survival. More than just present explicit consciousness is the mind. The architecture of its structures and operations is intricate. It goes beyond the linguistic, logical, analytical processes that are frequently popularly, but inaccurately, referred to as left brain activity. It encompasses all aspects of mental life, including the subconscious, the intuitive, the symbolic, and everything else that is occasionally referred to as belonging to the right brain. All that we use to reach out to and understand the world is our mind. The thinking process, a process of thought, is necessary for learning how to cultivate food, build a bridge, harness electricity, understand the medicinal properties of a substance, allocate resources to maximize productivity, recognize wealth-producing opportunities where none previously existed, conduct scientific experiments, and create. It takes a process of thought to respond to a child's or a spouse's concerns, to see that our actions don't always match our expressed emotions, to learn how to deal with hurt and anger in ways that will help rather than harm, even knowing when to give up on conscious efforts at problem-solving in favor of the subconscious, when to let conscious thinking come to an end, or when to pay closer attention to feelings or intuition involve a process of cognition and logical linkage, a decision to think or not to think. Though thinking is a must for successful living, humans are not wired to think naturally, which poses a dilemma and a challenge. We can choose. The functions of our heart, lungs, liver, and kidneys are not within our control. All of them are a part of the body's self-regulatory mechanism. Additionally, we are not required to oversee the homeostatic mechanisms that, for example, keep the temperature relatively constant. The organs and systems in our body were created by nature to work automatically in support of our survival without any human volition. But how our minds work varies. When it is needed, our minds do not pump knowledge like our hearts do blood. Even when it is obvious that acting on our best, most logical and educated knowledge would be helpful, our thoughts do not always direct us to do so. We don't start thinking instinctively just because ceasing to think in a certain circumstance is now unsafe for us. When faced with something new and unexpected, consciousness doesn't always reflexively expand. Occasionally it actually contracts. Nature has endowed us with a remarkable duty, the capacity to adjust the brightness or dimness of the searchlight of consciousness. This is the choice between intentionally avoiding or actively seeking out awareness, the choice between thinking and not thinking. Our freedom and responsibility stem from this. We can choose irrationally or rationally. We are the only species that can decide what ideals are worthwhile pursuing and then do the exact opposite. We are able to decide that a particular course of action is morally right and smart, postpone our judgment, and then carry out another activity. We can check to see if our actions are in line with our beliefs, knowledge, and ideals, but we can also choose not to ask ourselves that question. Thinking or not thinking is an option. I must first dim my level of consciousness if I know for a fact that alcohol is harmful to me yet nevertheless consume it. In order to choose to snort cocaine after knowing that it has cost me my last 3 jobs, I must first block out my knowledge and refuse to see what I see and know what I know. I am aware that the relationship I am in endangers my dignity, devastates my self-esteem, and jeopardizes my physical health. If I decide to stay in it, I must numb my senses, cloud my judgment, and become myself mentally incompetent. It's best to commit acts of self-destruction in the dark. Our decisions impact our sense of ourselves. Our decisions regarding how our consciousness functions have a significant impact on both our overall quality of life and our sense of self. Consider how the following choices would affect our lives and sense of self. Comparing focusing and non-focusing. Think versus don't think. Knowing versus not knowing. Clarity as opposed to ambiguity or vagueness. Respect for reality as opposed to avoiding it. Respect for facts as opposed to disregard for them. Respect for the truth as opposed to disbelief in it. The ability to keep trying to understand rather than giving up. Integrity is a matter of acting with loyalty to our professed convictions versus acting dishonestly, versus being dishonest with oneself. Self-avoidance against self-confrontation. Openness to fresh information versus narrow-mindedness. A willingness to recognize and fix mistakes as opposed to sticking with them. A concern for consistency as opposed to a contempt for contradictions. Respect for logic, consistency, coherence, and proof opposed rejection or defiance of these principles. Reason versus irrationalism. Fidelity to one's duty of consciousness versus betrayal of that duty. This list is a wonderful place to start if one wants to understand the roots of true self-esteem. Nobody could possibly imply in a serious manner that our pattern of decisions about the aforementioned possibilities will not have an impact over time on how we see our ability to handle life's challenges or how good we are. Awareness and responsibility. Mora, L. Options. The key is that, by virtue of our natures, our decisions must have an impact on our self-esteem, not that it should be affected. It would be illogical to claim that we should continue feeling equally as effective and deserving as we would feel if our choices had been better if we acquire habit patterns that cripple or incapacitate us for successful functioning, and that lead us to distrust ourselves. This would mean that how we feel about ourselves has no bearing on what we do or ought to do. To say that there shouldn't be a correlation between self-evaluation and behavior is one thing. To warn against associating oneself with a specific behavior is quite another. Offering feel-good ideas of self-esteem that separate it from issues of consciousness, accountability, or moral decision-making does people a disservice. Our need for self-esteem, which is the need to know that we are functioning as our life and well-being require, is brought on by the fact that we have options like those I've just described, that we are faced with options found nowhere else in nature, and that we are the only species capable of betraying and acting against our means of survival. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe for more content like this.